I'm not going to waste your time. I scored 1500 or higher 2 times I've taken the SAT, and I'm going to provide you 12 practical tips for the SAT. Now the first tip, this is the golden tip. If you take away anything from this video, take away this. Do a bunch of practice problems. Here's the key. For the ones you got wrong, understand why they are wrong. Categorize them into categories, like whether you read the question wrong, whether you just rushed, whether you just didn't know the content, or whatever the case. Make sure you understand why it's wrong and why the correct answer is correct. This way, it's the most optimal way of covering your mistakes and preventing them from happening in the actual test. Now for these other tips, they're going to be separated into reading, writing, and math. And these tips, they're more of like supplemental ways to actually help you understand the style of the test and to boost your test-taking skills. So number one, every answer is in the passage. There's no need for outside knowledge. So make sure that the answer that you pick is backed up by a quote in the passage. So in the reading section, you're juggling between two questions, and they both answer the question correctly. Only one of them is supported by a direct quote in the passage. Choose that. The SAT is designed so that there is no outside advantage given. So every answer is backed up by a passage. So make sure that the answer you choose is backed up by a quote in the passage. This leads me to point 2, which is kind of an extension of point 1, which broadens the availability of evidence. Because sometimes when asked for inference or implications, this has to do like context or tone. So you probably won't find a specific and small quote and say, oh, there it is. It's going to be more like a paragraph or just the style of the actual passage. So the answer is still in the passage. It's just broader. It's not just like a specific sentence or two. The third tip is to read the questions carefully. If there's just a little bit of the answer that's wrong, it's wrong. This SAT uses distractors to throw you off, so make sure you pay attention to the wording. And number 4 is to read to be interested, not just answer the questions. Because when you read to be interested, it helps develop a deeper understanding of the passage because you find the stuff interesting. So you're adding on this extra like shot in the arm of interest in the actual process of doing the test instead of just saying, oh, I just have to do this just to grind out all the questions. And it's just going to help you because you enjoy it and you find it interesting. Alright, number 5, we're moving on to the writing section. The writing section is a completely different play style than the reading section. The writing section, you're editing a document so you can read through it quicker, so you don't have to read through it as in-depth as the reading section, which is more like comprehension style. So you should try to reframe your goal to maximize efficiency. So you're reading it to edit the document, not for comprehension. So parts that don't have a square with a number in it that indicate a question, you just skip entirely. And the goal of this is to maximize time, so you don't have to read passages that don't really have to do anything with answering the questions. And of course, you shouldn't only just pay attention to sentences with the question. For a significant amount of the questions, you will need the context from surrounding sentences to understand and pick the correct answer. Although this is a different approach from the reading section, you still make sure to strike a balance between answering the questions and enjoying the content. Because, to be honest, some of the passages are pretty interesting, and that will help you pay attention, answer the questions, and make the process a lot more enjoyable. But you still have to make sure to pace yourself and stay focused on the goal of the writing section, which is just to edit the document. This also works in the reading section too. But if you enjoy the content, make sure you pace yourself. And I think if you enjoy the content, it's easier to pace yourself than if you don't enjoy the content. Because if you don't enjoy the content, you end up daydreaming, and it ends up detracting yourself and making your process a lot slower because you're not actually paying as much attention to what is going on in the actual passage. So, yes, enjoy yourself. Yes, be efficient, and also pace yourself. So the next tip is to prioritize conciseness. And this is something that I have to work on too, but when you're asked to rephrase a sentence or combine two sentences, the shortest one is usually correct. This works for edits where they use two similar words to describe something. You could trim it down to just one. Now for math, make sure you know your formulas. This will make the problems that are the plug and chug types a lot easier, like finding the zero-to quadratic or Pythagorean theorems. You have to set up the equations. So make sure to draw the diagrams because it helps make the process a lot easier and you can see what you need to find. And because most of these problems that are non-plug and chug, they're usually word problems. So having a diagram will make finding out what you need to know a lot easier. And for the 9th tip, it's a more strategic tip. It's a more strategic method that requires more awareness, but it can trim time a lot more efficiently. So you don't have to solve the problem all the way if you're kind of in a way process of eliminated the other answers. The concept to know here is that the SAT won't put answers that are super close to each other. They usually vary with a key aspect, like one answer is negative, one answer is positive, one has 3 digits, one has 2. And when you get to certain parts of a problem, like factoring a polynomial, and when, for example, if you see that none of the answers can be negative or have 3 digits, and the only valid option left is D, pick that. 10th tip is to use special tips to shortcut your problems. A key example of this in math is with quadratics. Because if you're asked to find the sum of the zeros, the formula you could use is S equals negative B over A. To find the product of zeros, it's P equals C over A. I'm not going to go through the whole proof of it in this video, but but if you're interested, I can make another video for that. When you're using these shortcuts, make sure that you're using it in the right scenario, because these, like the ones I've talked about, the sum and product, they're guaranteed when the equation given is a quadratic. If you're given an equation with x on both sides, one side has a radical over it, and you have to square both sides and then bring all the terms to one side of the equation, and then you end up with a quadratic, this shortcut is not guaranteed because the original equation has a radical, and some zeros might be extraneous. And here's a bonus tip that's a bit more general. Set up a marking system when you take the test. What I mean by this is to mark the question in a specific way to signify why you want to go back at it and the degree of its priority. If I want to come back to a question, like let's say if I guessed, or there's two questions that I'm stuck between, I end up circling the number to signify that I want to go back to that question. And if I use a shortcut method and I want to double check my answer if I have time, I'll just draw a triangle of the number. And when I go back, I make sure I prioritize the circles first, because those are the ones that I either guessed or I'm stuck between two answers. And then I'll go to the triangle ones because those are of less priority. And when I go back and double check all the answers that I marked, I put a check mark next to it to let myself know that I already answered the question. And also, side advice, don't be afraid to mark up your booklet. Getting your eraser and erasing the marks is not as time efficient as just checking it out, or just keep using the pencil. And that's all I have for you today in this video. If you are interested in watching another video on what to do on the actual day of the SAT, click this video right here. Keep growing.